So now we want to start to fetch our properties from the database, and we're going to start with the properties page here. All right, so the way this works is we're going to create an API route to use Mongoose to get the properties from the database, and then from our front end, right, from this component, we're going to then fetch from our API route and then display the properties. So let's start with the API route. So we'll go to app API properties route JSX. It's still this, we're making a GET request to slash API slash properties. In fact, what I'll usually like to do is put a comment here with exactly what this route is so we know. So this will be slash properties. Okay. Now we're already connecting to the database, so all we have to do really is just add a line of code here saying const properties, set that to await, and now since we brought in, or we didn't bring it in yet, but we will right now, the property model, so we want to bring in property from models property, and then we can await and then use that property model, which then has a method called find, and we can specify options in here, but we want to get all of everything, all the properties, so we're just going to put an empty object in here. And then all we have to do is then replace this, this object here, this message, get rid of that, and pass in properties. Okay, so now if I were to go back and do, let's say, localhost API slash properties, now as you can see, it's getting the data from the database. So we have to now fetch that from our front end. So let's go into app properties page.jsx, and even though this is a server component, we can still fetch data and load it with the page, right? If this were a client component, we would have to use we would do the use effect hook, the standard way of using React and making requests, but we can still fetch from a server component. Now, I just want to mention that a lot of the times in this course, in this project, when I write code, it's going to change later on. In fact, sometimes we might have a server component that later on we turn into a client component because we need to use a hook or whatever it might be. So keep that in mind. Not everything I do is going to stay that way. But for now, let's go ahead and use this server component and fetch the data from our API. So I'm going to comment out this properties. Actually, we can just get rid of that, the JSON file, because we're not going to use that anymore. And then let's go above the properties page function, and let's create another function to fetch the properties. And this isn't something you would do in a client component, but it's a server component, so we can do this. And then I'm going to open up a try catch, and then let's say const, so const res for the response, and we want to then make our request by calling fetch, and here we'll do HTTP localhost port 3000 slash API slash property. So exactly what I just showed you in the browser, we're now doing from the component. Now you might be saying, well, why are we putting this in here and not just slash API? Well, remember, this is on the server. So when you do this from the server, you do have to include the domain or it won't work. I mean, there's ways around it, but if we just take this out, it won't work. And we do have, in our env file, .env, we do have this next public API domain, so we can use that instead. So instead of this, make sure you get rid of the API as well. So just slash properties, and then before it, these have to be backticks. And then right before the slash, we can then put in our process.env and then the next public API domain slash properties. Okay, and then what we'll do is check to see if it fails. So if not res.ok, or you could check for the 200 status, then let's we'll say throw new error and say failed to fetch data. All right, and then under that, if it doesn't fail, then we're going to return that res object then has that JSON function on it, which will give us the data. So we're returning the data directly from this function. And then if there's an error, then we'll just do a console log of the error. And then that needs to be called, obviously. So let's come down here and let's say const properties, set that to fetch. Actually, we need to await fetch properties. And we need to make this properties page function asynchronous. And then what will happen is this properties variable will now contain the data from the database, and that's what we'll display down here. So let's save that, and let's come back to the properties page, and now this stuff should actually be coming from the database. And you can test it out if you go to Compass, and we can edit data from here. So like let's say I want to edit this. Do we have the address showing here? No. Let's change it from Boston Commons Retreat from 2 beds to 3. So I'll change that to 3 and update. And then back here, if I reload, I had to do a hard refresh. But now, yeah, you'll see three beds. So this data is coming from the database. And we can order them by date. I mean, I think they all have the same date because of the JSON file that I imported. But we could go right here and say sort properties by date. So we'll take the properties and call .sort. And then in here, pass in a function with A and B. And then we want to sort in ascending order. So we would do, let's say, new date, and then B dot created at, and then minus new date A dot created at. So that will do, yeah, so now Boston is at the end. Okay, so let's do the home page now, because right now the home page is still getting it from the JSON file. So you can see the Boston Commons Retreat doesn't have 3 beds, so it's still coming from the JSON file. So let's go to the app and then page.jsx, and let's basically do the same thing here. I'm sorry, we're in the home properties component. That's right, we didn't do it directly from the page. So let's go to components, home properties, and get rid of the JSON file here. And let's see, I'm gonna just grab the same function from what we just did, from the properties. Yeah, this right here. And we can put this in a separate file after, but we'll just grab that for now, and above the home properties, paste that in. Okay, and then we really don't have to, besides adding right here, properties equals await fetch properties. Besides doing this, there's nothing else we really have to do, because we're already using the properties variable here, which now is going to be coming from the back end, from the database. And we're still going to be sorting randomly and getting only 3. So let's save that. Properties is not defined. Oh. There we go. All right, so now these should be coming from the database. So if I reload till I see the Boston one, now you can see that one has 3 beds. So we know that that's coming from the database. So we technically don't need the JSON file anymore. You could actually delete that if you want, but I'm going to leave it there just because I want it in the main repo. So in the next video, we'll move this fetch properties to a separate file, since we're just repeating ourselves. And there's a couple other things I want to do in that file, so we'll do that next.